Good afternoon, everybody. I welcome you all to this session of Dialogic. Our speaker today is Dr. Sharmila Yadav. She's going to talk on the barriers to the implementation of inclusive education in India. We look forward to a very interesting talk from our speaker today. After Dr. Kaushik Ghosh introduces our speaker, Dr. Yadav can take over, and I would then request Dr. Shudev to carry on from there. Kaushik, please.
Thank you, Didi. So,
thank you,
Professor Raha ma'am. So, mentor of the Dialogic as well as the Young Scholar Lecture Series. So, it's my great privilege and honor to introduce with today's speaker. So, as you Didi mentioned before regarding the topic of the today's speech, and as well as the speaker, all are familiar with the Dr. Sharmila Yadav, and she is very much familiar and popular in the field of education. At present, she is discharging her duty as an assistant professor, Institute of Education, Visva-Bharati, and in teaching education psychology and inclusive education at both undergraduate and postgraduate level at Visva-Bharati. In spite of that, I am furnishing you another information regarding his credential, regarding his few experience, regarding his publication credential, etc. Actually, her areas of interest of research are mainly to use
Kaushik, may I just interrupt you?
Please
there are a number of microphones open, so your voice is echoing. Please, I request all of you, excepting the speaker, to please mute your microphones.
All the participants are hereby requested, please mute by on. Otherwise, I will arrange to mute by as a host. Please. Okay.
Shachota Ghoshal, please mute your microphone. Kaushik, could you please make me the co-host
Yes, then start.
I can control this.
Yes. Hopefully noise is already over. It's audible now?
Yes, continue. It's over.
Okay. Actually, I will continue.
Yes.
Her areas of interest are mainly to use and explore effects of innovative teaching learning strategies on student performing thinking skill, status of inclusive education across India, causes basically especially the preventive of disabilities, to study the attitude of parents, teachers and stakeholders towards the disabilities and child with disabilities in particular. Along with this, she has the capacity and capability of guidance, basically the education, vocational, personal guidance of the adolescent, and to provide the need-based counseling. In spite of that, I am furnishing another information on her educational qualification. So this is the very long journey, started from UG, PG, B.Ed, MSc, M.Ed, MA in psychology, MPhil in education from the Kurukshetra University, and a couple of few years ago, she has completed her PhD degree from the Institute of Education, Visva-Bharati. So his teaching journey is very long. At present, more than 13 years of teaching experience in her credit, 9 years in Visva-Bharati University. I have already mentioned before, she is engaged in now Institute of Education, 3 years in Regional Institute of Education, Ajmer, under the NCERT, New Delhi, 1 year in RAS College of Education, Rewari. So she has presented more than 20 papers in various national, international seminar, conference. She has published more than 15 research papers, including the book chapters in reputed journals, especially in the area of inclusive education and mental health related issues. So may I request Dr. Sharmila Yadav, because we are waiting for another excellent lecture. So Dr. Sharmila Yadav, please.
Thank you, Kaushik sir. Very good afternoon to all of you. At the very outset, I want to thank organizers for giving me opportunity to share my research interest at this learned platform in front of all the professors, my colleagues, and my dear students. So today, I want to talk about barriers to the implementation of inclusive education in India. Before I start, I would like to explain certain terms which I will be using during my talk, because I know there are many professors who are not from this field. So because I will be using these terminologies or terms throughout my talk. So the first one is inclusive education. So it is ensuring quality education for all children in their neighborhood schools. It refers to an education system that accommodates all children, irrespective of their physical, intellectual, social, emotional, linguistic, or other conditions. Means including all, whether the child is street child, whether he or she is nomadic child, whether barrier, everybody is included. It means all, education for all. So, however, in my today's talk, the focus of my talk will be inclusion of children with disabilities only, and barriers in the implementation of inclusive education, just with reference to children with disabilities. We use the term PWD or CWD, means persons with disabilities or children with disabilities, means वो बच्चे जिनकी कुछ special needs हैं, जैसे children with visual impairment या child with visual impairment, hearing impairment, autism spectrum disorder, specific learning disabilities, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, etc. So मैं बताना चाहूंगी inclusive education के साथ साथ integrated education term भी use की जाती है. So however, both are different. When we say integrated education, in this system, authority, school teachers remain as they are. No changes in the system. Although they give admission, principal or authority, a school system give admission to these children in their schools. Whereas there is all round difference, right? Pura 180 degree का difference है. In case of inclusive education, ना केवल बच्चे को admission दिया जाता है, मगर साथ में ये ensure किया जाता है कि हर बच्चे की needs, abilities के according पढ़ाया जाए, so that she can participate fully in all the school activities. Again, यहाँ हमें समझने की जरूरत है, not all children with disabilities should be included, because their placement depends on the degree of disability. So according to degree of disability, we categorize them as mild, moderate, marginal, severe, profound. So generally mild, moderate and marginal cases, they are educable and trainable. Whereas there are certain cases like severe and profound, they remain home or hospital bound because of their high degree of disability. So एक और बात जो आप पूछ सकते हैं, इनके लिए तो special schools हैं ना. Here again research says, if we want inclusive society and want that children with disability also contribute in country's economy, and we always say they should behave like so-called normal के जैसा ये behave करें, तो अगर हम इनको exclude करके रखेंगे, तो ये normal बच्चे या normal human beings कैसे behave कर रहे हैं, ये इनको कैसे पता चलेगा? So ultimately they have to come to society. अगर आप schools में exclude करते हैं, society में तो रहेंगे ही. So then they need to be, that's why they need to be admitted in inclusive schools. So now I will talk about why inclusive education. Integrated तो है, special तो था ही, तो inclusive की बात क्यों कर रहे हैं? So because it promotes inclusive society. In this system, children with disabilities are respected. This system is based on the belief that all children can learn. Even policies जैसे right to education focus करता है कि right of there is a all children have the right to free and compulsory education from 6 to 14 years. And the most recent one is RPWD Act, Right of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. Also, which it includes 21 disabilities: hearing impairment, visual impairment, physical impairment, dwarfism, intellectual disability, hemophilia, sickle cell anemia, etc. इसके अलावा जो not RPWD Act is not most recent, and most recent policy is NEP 2020, and it says about inclusive and equitable education. Inclusive and equitable education, while it is an essential goal in its own right, it is also critical to achieving an inclusive and equitable society in which every citizen has the opportunity to dream, thrive, and contribute to the nation. So this policy recognizes the importance of creating enabling mechanisms for providing children with special needs or Divyang the same opportunities of obtaining quality education as any other child. Not only this, the Global Education Development Agenda reflected in the goal 4, SDG 4 of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted in India in 2015, seeks to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning for all. I am focusing for all by 2030. Not only these, ऐसा नहीं है कि ये policies अभी आई हैं, इससे पहले भी NP 1986, National Policy on Education in 1986 says, wherever it is feasible, common school system में सभी को admission दीजिए. PWD Act, Persons with Disabilities Act 1995, barrier-free environment for children with disabilities की बात करता है. इसके अलावा सर्व शिक्षा अभियान launched by government has the goal of 8 years of elementary schooling for all children, including child with disabilities. Even National Curriculum Framework 2005 says include diversity, respect them, respect their dignity. So the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, ratified in 2007 by India, focuses on equal enjoyment of all human rights. तो आप देखेंगे there is a list of policies. ऐसा नहीं है कि policies नहीं हैं. There are lots of policies. लेकिन still researchers कहती हैं, status reports कहती हैं कि there are barriers. So now we will see what are the barriers to the implementation of inclusive education in India with special reference to, मैं बार बार ये बता रही हूँ कि इसमें please confuse मत होइएगा. Street children, nomadic children, disadvantaged children, slow learners, everybody is included, even the normal ones. But I'm talking just about children with disabilities. उन्हीं के regarding policies हैं, उन्हीं के regarding barriers की बात हो रही है. So the barriers are attitudinal barriers, environmental barriers, lack of resources, teacher preparation, inadequate teacher preparation, rigid curriculum, inappropriate teaching strategies, and assessment techniques. So first of all, I will talk about attitudinal barriers, and this is the biggest and the foremost barrier. Negative attitude towards child with disabilities becomes a barrier of this negative attitude is at all levels. ये home के level पे भी है, family, parents, community level पे भी है, schools, teachers, and government officials. So अच्छा ये negative
नहीं आता है, चाहेंगे रख के सोना तो भी नहीं आएगा, तो फिर
आता कहाँ से है negative attitude? Because of the taboo. हमारी सोसाइटी में कुछ टैबूज हैं. पेरेंट्स को शेम फील होती है, lack of knowledge, misinformation about certain disabilities, या socio-economic values about the human life, and respect and dignity. तो ये नेगेटिव एटीट्यूड का जो इम्पैक्ट है, इट इज एविडेंट एट होम लेवल, स्कूल लेवल, एवरीवेयर. सो इफ स्टेक होल्डर्स don't have knowledge and awareness of various special needs of children with disabilities, they will deny admission in common schools. Teachers see them as burden. System think that they cannot learn. They are better remain at home. If school give admission, so parents of normal children transfer their kid to another school. If in one of my research work, I interviewed principal of Bloomingdale School, Kolkata. She shared her experience of parents denying to continue in their school because that school is giving admission to child with disabilities. So this clearly shows lack of knowledge, because research कहती हैं, even NCF 2005 position paper for children with special needs focus करता है कि both child with disabilities and child without disabilities, when they learn together, so both are benefited. कहीं किसी को नुकसान नहीं होता, दोनों को ही benefits ही होते हैं. So they both gets benefited by learning, participating together. Even research तो ये भी कहती है, literature तो ये भी कहता है कि अगर इन बच्चों के इंटरव्यूज लिए गए हैं तो इन्होंने कहा हमें इंक्लूड करने के लिए will the system wait for the research findings? जब research findings ये कहेंगी कि हमें इंक्लूड कर दीजिए तो इंक्लूड किया जाएगा, अदरवाइज क्या हम एक्सक्लूजन में रहेंगे? So it's again it's a rights issue, it's a dignity issue. जब हम रिसर्च करेंगे और उसमें जब फाइंडिंग्स आएंगी कि कहीं ये किसी को नुकसान तो नहीं कर देंगे, तब हम ऐड करेंगे, अगेन इट्स इनजस्टिस फॉर देम. सो ये एटीट्यूड का बात है. सो ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. ये रिसर्च, बहुत रिसर्च रिपोर्ट्स में बात की गई है. सो दे हैव ऑल द राइट टू लिव अ लाइफ विद डिग्निटी एंड रिस्पेक्ट. हियर व्हेन आई एम्पैथाइज्ड विद द चाइल्ड विद डिसेबिलिटी, एंड आई थिंक एज he may be thinking, and this is coming to my mind just because of dealing with this paper since 2005. Suppose considering myself as child with disability, I'm asking to my mama, my teacher and my friends, mama मैंने जो गुनाह किया है, कुसूर किया है, उसकी सजा दीजिए, मगर यूं अपने प्यार से, दुलार से महरूम ना कीजिए. ममा जब आप मुझे बाजार नहीं ले जाती, पार्क में नहीं ले जाती, मैरिजेस में शामिल नहीं होने देती, मुझे अकेले घर में बड़ी घुटन होती है. जब सेंसस सर्वे होते हैं, आप सिर्फ मेरी बहन जो नॉर्मल है उसी एक को अपना बच्चा बताती हैं, मुझे छुपाती हैं. मेरा मन करता है मैं पैदा ही क्यों हुई. ममा आप मुझे स्कूल भेजिए तो सही, चलिए मैं पढ़ूंगी नहीं. मैं गाना तो अच्छा गाती हूँ, क्या पता मैं गाने की फील्ड में कुछ अच्छा करूं. ममा मैं ऐसी हूं, अलग हूं, इसमें आपकी भी तो गलती रही होगी, फैमिली की भी तो कुछ गलती रही होगी. स्ट्रेस ली होगी आपने, प्रॉपर न्यूट्रिशन नहीं लिया होगा, मेडिसिन या सप्लीमेंट्स के पैसे नहीं होंगे आपके पास, हाई बीपी रहा होगा, थायराइड, डायबिटीज जैसे इश्यू रहे होंगे, ड्यूरिंग माई डिलीवरी अपोक्सिया हो गया होगा. मेरा ऐसा होने में डॉक्टर्स का भी कुछ कसूर होगा. फूड में पेस्टिसाइड्स, हार्मफुल कलर्स या प्रिजर्वेटिव्स का कंट्रीब्यूशन भी रहा होगा, क्योंकि रिसर्चर्स कहते हैं लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटीज या स्पेसिफिक लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटीज का वन ऑफ द कॉजेस प्रिजर्वेटिव्स एंड हार्मफुल कलर्स इन द फूड. तो मैं मेरे टीचर से कहना चाहती हूँ, जब मैं क्लास में आती हूँ और टीचर आप कोट अनकोट अंधी कह देते हो, तब जो मेरी आंखों की बची हुई रोशनी है उस वक्त ही बुझ सी जाती है. और सर या टीचर, जब आप मेरे भाई को कोट अनकोट लंगड़ा कह देते हो तो उसका जो एक पैर पर चलने का जज्बा था वही चकनाचूर हो जाता है। टीचर, क्या आप जानते हो, आप हम हमें मम्मी पापा से भी ज्यादा हम आपको मानते हैं। आपसे हमारी बड़ी उम्मीदें हैं। मैं मेरे फ्रेंड से कहना चाहती हूँ, जब मुझे देखते ही तुम डरकर भाग जाते हो या हंसकर मेरा मजाक बनाते हो, मेरा स्कूल आने का ही मन नहीं करता। आप सबको तो नर्सरी से ही एटिकेट्स, बिहेवियर, मैनरिज्म्स सिखाए जाते हैं। आपकी तो बुक्स हैं, आप उन बुक्स में पढ़ते भी हो, आपके सिलेबस में ये वैल्यूज पढ़ाई जाती हैं। मेरी रिस्पेक्ट को फिर क्यों ठेस पहुंचाते हो? प्लीज आप सब मेरा गुनाह बताइए, मुझे सजा दीजिए, मगर यूं अलग करके, एक्सक्लूड करके, लेबल करके हर वक्त मुझे मेरी डिसेबिलिटीज का एहसास मत दिलाइए। तो आपने देखी होंगी पा में प्रोजेरिया था, तारे जमी पे। there are movies, मीडिया yes it's playing the role, लेकिन स्टिल लेबलिंग इज अ इशू। इनको किस तरह से बुलाना है इज अ इशू। और ये बच्चे के मन में जो जुस्तजू चल रही है, दैट इज ऑल्सो अ इशू, कि हम इतने लर्नड होने के बाद भी उसके मन में क्या ठेस पहुंच रही है वो हम कभी समझ नहीं पाते। So these thoughts clearly shows that lack of knowledge, understanding, sensitivity of parents, teachers and peers towards children with disabilities. आप Google search कीजिएगा, there are ample examples like Helen Keller. She is suffering severely from multiple disabilities, blind, right, as well as deaf. Jim Abbott, दोनों ही palms नहीं थी, and he is a very good baseball player. Stephen Hawking, everybody knows. Nicholas Vizicek, who despite their multiple disabilities, they excelled. I think sky is the limit for them. They excelled in their life, and they are very doing. Nick Vizicek, you can see, he has 2 kids, right, and they are both normal, and he was suffering from progeria, not progeria, paraplegia. So I also want to mention, share experiences of teacher who teach in KV, in a KV in Chamba. She says when she was appointed in KV, she got 3rd class, and other teachers told her, quote unquote, "Oh poor girl, you got 3rd class. तुम्हें 3rd class मिल गई है, तुम कैसे मैनेज करोगी? उसमें वो सिरदर्दी है, उसको डांट कर रखना, नहीं तो तुम्हारे सर चढ़ जाएगी। वो बहुत बिगड़ी हुई लड़की है, उसे कुछ नहीं आता, वो quote unquote डफर है, डम्बो है." But when she dealt with that class, the girl named Muskan, she was suffering from mild autism. The girl named Muskan, who although not good in academics, but वो कॉम्बो बहुत अच्छा बजाती थी, एक्स्ट्रा ऑर्डिनरी टैलेंट था उसमें, पेंटिंग, म्यूजिक बहुत अच्छा था, उसको चांस ही नहीं दिया जाता था। That teacher whose interview I have taken told me that when she has given that girl chance to play combo and she has given that love and affection, she talked with her and she has built confidence, talked with the teacher, shared her feelings, she cried and told how other teachers behave with her. टीचर ने बताया कि उसने सिर्फ उसको हक किया, प्लेग्राउंड में थोड़ी देर उसके साथ खेली, उसके आंसू पहुंच दिए, एंड उसका रीडिंग एंड राइटिंग में प्रॉब्लम था। नाउ शी इज इन 9th क्लास। एंड सेकंड केस जो टीचर से इंटरव्यू लेने पे पता चला, आदित्य ठाकुर, he was in 1st class. He was suffering from albinism, and albinism एक congenital absence है of pigment in the skin and hair, and because of this albinism बच्चे का eyes में problem आती है। He was also exceptionally good. 1st class में 10 तक tables learn थे, but उसको problem थी with writing. ब्लैक बोर्ड से वो देख के लिख नहीं पाता था। So teachers generally oral exam उसका लेते थे and एग्जाम्स कंडक्ट कर लेते थे. एक बार इंस्पेक्शन हुआ उस स्कूल में एंड उसकी कॉपी में सिर्फ 2 ही पेजेस फिल थे. उसके बाद प्रेशर दिया गया कि इसको लिखवाइए, प्रैक्टिस करवाइए लिखवाने की. सो प्रेशर दिया गया कि वह ब्लैक बोर्ड से लिखे. दिस क्रिएटेड प्रेशर ऑन हिम. ही स्टार्टेड फीलिंग वेरी वीक. उसका कॉन्फिडेंस लूज हो गया एंड फाइनली उसने स्कूल छोड़ दिया. केस 3 में डिस्कस करूंगी. कनिका गर्ल है उसी स्कूल में, उसको रीडिंग राइटिंग में प्रॉब्लम है. स्टिल टीचर्स ये फाइंड आउट नहीं कर पाए कि उसका प्रॉब्लम क्या है, बिकॉज वो बहुत कम कम्युनिकेट करती है. सो इन तीनों केस स्टडीज से कहां लेक्यूना लगता है? देयर इज लेक्यूना इन सिस्टम. There is lacuna in our system. Lots of workshops are conducted, but they don't teach, they don't develop those competencies and skills ताकि जो teachers हैं वो deal कर पाए children with disabilities के साथ. So 90% teachers don't want to change. अनीता जुल्का प्रोफेसर हैं NCERT में, उनका maximum studies visual impairment पे हैं. Otherwise she has created lots of manuals and materials and modules on how to create inclusive classrooms. तो उनके स्टडीज शो करती हैं कि 90% टीचर्स they don't want to change, they want to teach with traditional pedagogies. They want good results. And children with disabilities को inspections के दिन absent होने के लिए कहा जाता है कि you remain absent, घर पे रहना आज. हमारी क्लास में सारे बच्चे परफेक्ट हों ऐसा टीचर्स सोचते हैं. So to her, to that teacher which I have interviewed, all these things about inclusive education is bookish unless and until teachers attitude is positive. अगर उनका विल पावर नहीं है चेंज करने के लिए, चेंज होने के लिए, तो फिर अगर नेगेटिव एटीट्यूड ही है तो इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन को इम्प्लीमेंट करना बहुत मुश्किल है. So this is about attitude, which plays a very significant role in implementation of inclusive education in schools as well as in higher education. Next, I will talk about physical barriers. We talk about accessible India, but when you see ground realities, infrastructure, architecture, old school buildings becomes a barrier to inclusion. Policies कहती हैं neighborhood schools में admission दीजिए, neighborhood schools. However, children with disabilities who live in rural areas, distance of school from their home becomes a barrier. Very few buildings have ramps. Elevators और lifts के जो door हैं इतने narrow हैं कि wheelchair enter नहीं हो सकती. RPWD Act 2016 में dwarfism भी included है. Just reflect washrooms, toilet sheets, drinking water. Are these manufactured keeping in mind all children? Yeah, all persons? No. Their standard size shows that person has to adjust. And when we say child को adjust करना होगा system के according, तो वह inclusive education नहीं हो सकता. Inclusive here system needs to be ready. चाहे फिर वह infrastructure की बात हो, resources की बात हो. And we also talk about UDL, Universal Design for Learning. Again, very few buildings are with ramps. And in one of my studies, when I have seen status of inclusive education, I have seen buildings where there is no ramp and child with physical impairment used to attend his class at first floor daily using his both palms on the stairs, on the steps, each step, where all other people walking with foot. See the tragedy. Where is sensitivity? Where are funds? Where is implementation of policies? Is the system making their life easy or difficult? ऐसा नहीं है कि हो नहीं रहा है, लेकिन वो इतना कम हो रहा है. जैसे बाला system is there, building as a learning aid, मगर वो sufficient नहीं है. So next barrier is lack of resources. Children with disabilities require special support services like assistive devices or aids, or we can say appliances, to facilitate their participation in the regular schools. An inclusive school must have resources in the form of human, material, equipment, etc. So the human resources include parents, teachers, resource teachers, special educators, psychologists, social workers, but schools have seriously insufficient resources to support children with disabilities. There is inadequate supply of teaching learning material, जिनको हम TLM कहते हैं, which includes prescribed textbooks also. And this lack of resources hampers learning, participation, and assessment of children. For example, braille, large print books, magnifying lens, canes are the minimum things needed by child with visual impairment. In addition to this, they require JAWS, speech to text, and text to speech softwares. Whereas annual status studies done by NGOs for implementation of Right to Education Act 2009 shows that our schools seriously lack resources, and this becomes a barrier to inclusive education. Now, the next barrier is teacher preparation. So in order to implement inclusive education, we need to train teachers. So that they attain skills and competency to teach the diverse group of students in class. Teachers should have knowledge of various policies, characteristics, identifying features of different types of disabilities, and also curriculum adaptations. However, here again, when you see ground realities in India, the system is like teacher education. It's divided into two: pre-service teacher education program and in-service teacher education. And if we talk about in-service teacher education, very few universities are offering and giving training in special education. They have B.Ed special and M.Ed special. Others are offering B.Ed and M.Ed only, and that caters to only normal children. The other way out is providing in-service training to teachers and teacher educators. Although lots of faculty development programs, key resource persons training are being carried out by NCERT and its regional institutes across Indian states, still studies conducted by Julka, Minke, Deemer, Griffin, cited in Julka 2014, Teachers Creating Inclusive Classrooms, shows that mainstream classroom teachers do not have knowledge, skills, or resources to plan as well as teach adequately students with special educational needs. And another problem is there is high teacher-student ratio. Learners of diverse abilities have to be taught together. We need more schools with more trained teachers. As mentioned in Professor Julka's manual, Teachers Creating Inclusive Classrooms, I'm quoting views of teachers and principals regarding this. Yes, I know the teacher. I know Right to Education Act expects me to admit children with disabilities in my school. But how will I teach Ambika? She can't hear us, neither she can speak, and she doesn't understand what I try to tell her through my body language. So this is just one example of the reactions of innumerable principals and teachers of government schools across India. All these teachers are well-meaning. However, they are severely handicapped by lack of awareness and knowledge about how they can, with a little effort, support the learning of children like Ambika. So we can say that there is ample number of research which says that untrained teachers and teacher training becomes a barrier to inclusive education. And the next barrier is curriculum. Next barrier is inappropriate curriculum. In our country, curriculum is designed centrally. However, children with disabilities need inclusive, individualized education programs. Curriculum, when it is rigid, that doesn't allow for experimentation, becomes a barrier. For children with disabilities, curriculum needs adaptations. जैसे आपने देखा होगा कैक्टस हैं, रोज हैं, ये अडेप्ट कर लेते हैं इन्वायरमेंट को देखते हुए. उसी तरह से हमें भी अपने करिकुलम को अडेप्ट करना है. ये अडेप्टेशंस दो तरह की हो सकती हैं. accommodations in the form of accommodations या फिर modifications. Accommodations में for example you can increase the time. जैसे ये जो 10th क्लास के एग्जाम सीबीएसई लेती है तो ब्लाइंड को थोड़ा सा टाइम दे देते हैं. जो चाइल्ड विद विजुअल इम्पेयरमेंट है उनको थोड़ा टाइम ज्यादा दे देते हैं. So give more time to write for child with visual impairment, provide large print books. तो यहाँ पर expectations या goals same हैं. उनको वैसा ही करना है जैसे कि किसी नॉर्मल बच्चे के लिए expectations रखी गई हैं. Whereas in case of modifications, goals or expectations are lowered. However, according to research synthesis carried out by Scott, by Shrugs, Mastropieri, teachers usually preferred instructional adaptations that call for minimum preparations. They also don't want to put more and more efforts in this thing. So they want adaptations which require minimum preparation. We can say they chose to carry out a general adaptation to instruction over a significant individual adaptation of the curriculum. And the next is inappropriate teaching strategies. The next barrier is inappropriate teaching strategies. Inclusive setup puts, or we can say, poses additional responsibilities on teachers as they are required to teach a diverse group of children with special needs. Diversity can be seen in the form of learning styles, pace of learning, yeah, rate of learning, and special needs of children. For example, a child with hearing impairment may learn more when content is shown to him or her, either written in blackboard or presented through PowerPoint. It means he is visile. And normal बच्चा भी visile हो सकता है, लेकिन hearing impairment बच्चे के लिए तो vision is the only thing. उसे सुनाई नहीं दे रहा तो उसको देख के ही करना है. So this is applicable to child without disabilities also. Some children may need content to be repeated again. They want repetitions. The pace with which a child learns also varies from child to child and with the subject which he she is dealing, learning. So here teachers, in order to meet the needs of children with disabilities, should have knowledge of different pedagogies, strategies to teach the diverse group. Teachers are required to include multisensory approach, peer tutoring, cooperative learning, differentiated instruction, and universal design for learning. However, teachers lack knowledge and competence, which made it difficult for them to use appropriate teaching strategies. Also, teachers interviewed under a study conducted by NCERT feel that they neither have the time nor the training to use inclusive teaching strategies in the classrooms. So they want these children to be taught by special teachers in regular or special schools. Whereas again research कहती हैं, society चाहती है, policies कहती हैं कि इनको include कीजिए. But because teachers, they lack knowledge, they lack competence, that's why they also ignore. So now the next barrier is assessment. Because अगर हम curriculum की बात कर रहे हैं, हम pedagogy की बात कर रहे हैं, हम infrastructure या resources की बात कर रहे हैं. So end is assessment. How you are assessing. So as children with disabilities needs few adaptations in curriculum and appropriate teaching strategies to meet their special educational needs. So accordingly, their assessment should not be rigid. How a teacher is going to assess students depends on how he taught in the class. In case of children with disabilities, assessment techniques also depends on the specific abilities of a child. For example, to assess a child with visual impairment, teacher needs to give oral examination. If a teacher remains rigid about taking written test for all, she and he is doing injustice. It again becomes a barrier. Here I want to share some of the responses from teachers on difficulties faced in carrying out adaptations in continuous and comprehensive evaluation, CCE. 24% teachers said they had not adapted assessment procedures for children with special needs and they continue to assess children with special needs like like others using traditional assessment techniques. जो written exam हम देते हैं. So only 8% said they had adapted the assessment as per need of children with special needs, like simplifying the questions, providing extra time, and using simple teaching learning material in language and mathematics. Teachers find it difficult to assess children with hearing impairment and intellectual and developmental disabilities in the regular system. So we can say that although policies are there, rights की बात होती है, still barriers हैं. These barriers need to be removed, and the responsibility doesn't lies on only government or principal or teachers. It is a joint responsibility of all the stakeholders. At the end, I would like to summarize by sharing words of Manjushri Patil, founder director, Atman Academy, Thane, Maharashtra. I know what they know, but my knowing doesn't show. I feel what they feel, but unnoticed my feelings go. I grow the way they grow, yet my growing's ignored easily. But I don't learn the way they do, and that they point out quickly. Filling my report card with a bunch of A's is hard. I wish they did give a chance so I could show them the way I dance. I only wish they did understand. I really do know what they know, but it's just that my way of showing it has a very different glow. I'm proud to be me, but they make me feel differently. I'm happy to be the way I am. I may not do things perfectly, but I know, grow, think, and feel like them quite clearly. It's just when I read, recall, recite, and write, I do it clumsily. They may laugh at me because I am different, but I won't laugh at them, though they are all same. To each his own is what I have learned. We each get our share of fun, fret, and fame. I'm in their midst. I'm really there. I do wish they did dare to care. When they don't, I shout out loud, hoping that someone will spot me in the crowd. Don't ignore me, I say. If I'm not as good as you, why it's happened, I don't have a clue. If I can't learn it your way, and that is often true, please let me learn it my way. Oh, please do. I have a host of abilities hidden behind my disability. I'm not proud. I'm not ashamed. And that I wish they would see. I wish they did care enough to help me conquer my adversity with a little more honor and grace, and certainly lots of dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav, for that scintillating and thought-provoking lecture, the kind of lecture that takes on greater significance because it is being delivered not only in an exclusive, but then again larger, in the larger term sense of the term, a very inclusive university which has its history beginning with the idea of inclusion. And that inclusion began long back in late 19th century, where the idea of education was being, founded about by our founder. So the kind of exclusion and inclusion that we are talking about is a kind of judgment that still continues, whereas we want to send our children to exclusive schools, yet in the very terminology of the fact, we are not making our own education systems part of the inclusion. So thank you once again for proposing this in a very interesting and very emotional presentation, specifically like the poem at the end. So now the lecture is open to discussion. If you have any questions, please type them onto the chat box. There are a couple of questions, so without further ado, let me sort of read the questions to you. This is from Shashwata Bhattacharya. How much economic disparity of the society is responsible for the psychological barriers leading towards the exclusion of children with special disabilities? We know that COVID-19 crisis has made the problem much more critical, leading towards further exclusivism. How government can deal with it and include them in collaborative learning method, and how the students with disabilities can be included in the current form of blended mode of or online education system. So these are to be taken together in the concept of COVID-19 that's happening right now, not only across the world, but also in our university, the blended mode of education. So Dr. Yadav, please respond.
Yes, ये बात है कि इकोनॉमिक डिस्पैरिटी जो है ये काफी ज्यादा कंट्रीब्यूट करता है, और कोरोना डेज में इसने और ज्यादा इन बच्चों के लिए, आई हैव सीन देयर आर स्टूडेंट्स जो देयर आर चिल्ड्रन जो स्पेशल स्कूल्स द्वारका में जा रहे थे, दिल्ली में कंटिन्यू किया हुआ था, दे लेफ्ट एंड देयर हम वी सो कॉल्ड नॉर्मल affected very much, so they are affected severely बिकॉज इनके लिए कोई चैनल नहीं था, इनके लिए कोई टीचर्स नहीं थे, इनके लिए कोई पैडागॉगी नहीं था, ये बाहर भी नहीं जा पाए. इवन एम्स एंड जो गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल्स हैं, अगर सीवियरली सेरेब्रल पाल्सीड है या ऑटिज्म जिसको है, या फिर किसी का सीटी स्कैन होना है, हेड स्कैन होना है, वो मेडिकल प्रिस्क्रिप्शंस भी वो बच्चा नहीं ले पाया. तो यस, इकोनॉमिकल डिस्पैरिटी या जो इस तरह का जो पैंडेमिक है उसने इस चीज इन बच्चों के लिए और ज्यादा ये जो डिस्टेंस है या इंक्लूसिविटी को रिड्यूस किया है, और ज्यादा इफेक्ट किया है. एंड सेकंड जो आप बता रहे हैं, पूछ रहे हैं कि ब्लेंडेड लर्निंग में, तो अगेन टीचर्स को वो जो पैडागॉगीज हैं या टेक्नो सेवी पैडागॉगीज हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल ऑडियो मटेरियल, वीडियो मटेरियल, राइट, टेक्टाइल हो नहीं पाएगा, तो मैक्सिमम मटेरियल कुछ इस तरह का प्रोवाइड किया जाए, या इवन पेरेंट्स को भी इंक्लूड किया जाए, और वो एक्टिविटीज जो हैं वो उनको इस तरह के मटेरियल फॉर्म में दें ताकि वो इंक्लूड हो पाए, या ताकि उनका जो ये लर्निंग का प्रोसेस है वो कंटिन्यू रहे.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. The next question comes from Shachwata Ghoshal. As education starts from home itself, so what do you think about including parents in inclusive education, ma'am? What do you think about educating and counseling parents?
Yes, of course, Swachudaya. मैंने तो बोला पेरेंट्स आर इम्पोर्टेंट स्टेक होल्डर्स, उनके बिना तो नहीं होगा. इवन हम जैसे जिनके पेरेंट्स जो हैं वो डॉक्टर्स हैं या साइकोलॉजिस्ट हैं या स्पेशल एडुकेटर्स हैं, वो स्कूल में कम्युनिटी एंगेजमेंट की हम जब बात करते हैं, तो यस, उनकी सर्विसेज हमको लेनी है, तभी पॉसिबल होगा. अदरवाइज इतने रेगुलर नॉर्मल स्कूल्स में अगर आप पेरेंट्स को इन्वॉल्व नहीं करते तो इट्स नॉट पॉसिबल, बिकॉज उस बच्चे के जो आइडेंटिफाइंग फीचर्स हैं, बच्चे के जो माइलस्टोन्स हैं या डेवलपमेंटल डिलेज हैं, उनको तो पेरेंट्स ही बताएंगे. 9 months में क्या बेबी ने चलना शुरू कर दिया, क्या हेड होल्डिंग उसकी हो गई, हियरिंग कब हुआ, तो ये जो बेसिक माइलस्टोन्स की बातें या फिर कुछ और डिटेल्स हैं, वो तो चाइल्ड की या आइडेंटिफाइंग फीचर्स पेरेंट्स कंट्रीब्यूट करेंगे, राइट. एंड इसके अलावा भी ये दे आर इंपॉर्टेंट स्टेक होल्डर्स. जर्नी तो यहीं से स्टार्ट हो रही है, राइट. इनको इंक्लूड किए बिना तो इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन पॉसिबल ही नहीं है. इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में इनको रखना ही होगा. दे आर टीचर्स, जो चाइल्ड विद डिसेबिलिटी हैं उनके पेरेंट्स टीचर्स हैं, स्पेशल एडुकेटर्स हैं, रिसोर्स टीचर्स हैं, मेडिकल प्रोफेशन में है, नर्सिंग में है, उन सब के जो सर्विसेज हमको चाहिए, तब जाके ये पॉसिबल होगा. यू आर वेरी राइट.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. If there are any more questions, please write them in on the chat box. And I have a question for you, Dr. Yadav. This is a longish question because I had a MPhil scholar, she's been successfully given her degree, who was working on what was called crip theory. Now, I'm sure you know about this term. Crip is coming from the word cripple, which was used as a kind of a derogatory, pejorative sense, but the disability studies movement, which began in the 1960s and the 70s, they have sort of taken over and are reusing the term as a kind of a forward positive looking term. So crip theory is the theory which began life as something which was exclusion, now has become part of the inclusion theory. So what I want you to ask this question, this is a question that the girl who worked with me had raised, and that's my first real look into disability studies and crip theories is, do you think that to what extent should the inclusive theories, inclusive pro-inclusion acts and actions be taken at the higher levels of education, say at the master's and the MPhil and the PhD? To what extent can we then talk about inclusion theories if the base is not yet done at the school level? Or can, without the base, without having an inclusive theory or inclusive education, to what extent can higher education become part of this inclusionary movement? I hope it's a valid question. It sounded so very naive.
सर, मैं बताना चाहूंगी कि मैंने शुरू में भी आपको मतलब बताया था, आपने सुना होगा कि हम जब इंक्लूजन की बात करते हैं तो हम कभी भी ये नहीं कहते कि सभी को इंक्लूड कर दीजिए, खासकर जब चिल्ड्रन विद डिसेबिलिटीज की बात होती है, बिकॉज अभी आरपीडब्ल्यूडी एक्ट तो कहता है 21 डिसेबिलिटीज, बट देयर आर सर्टेन डिसेबिलिटीज लाइक इंटेलेक्चुअल एंड डेवलपमेंटल डिसेबिलिटी, ऑटिज्म स्पेक्ट्रम डिसऑर्डर, स्पेसिफिक लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटीज. बड़ा मुश्किल है अगर वो सीवियर सेरेब्रल पाल्सी, इनको आप हायर एजुकेशन तक ले जाना, बिकॉज इंटेलेक्चुअल डिसेबिलिटी अगेन सेज जिनका IQ 90 70 से भी कम है अगर उनका IQ, तो वो आप उनको उनका मैथमेटिकल, उनका लॉजिकल, उनका रीजनिंग नहीं होगा. उनको आप ज्यादा से ज्यादा दे आर ट्रेनेबल, आप ट्रेनिंग दे सकते हैं, लेकिन ऐसा कहें कि उनको पढ़ाना ही है या हायर एजुकेशन तक उनको PhD करवानी है, ये कहीं पर भी नहीं लिखा. राइट हमेशा यही बात होती है, यस जहां तक हो सके इंक्लूड कीजिए, ताकि एटलीस्ट वो जो नॉर्मल जो सो कॉल्ड नॉर्मल लोग बिहेव करते हैं, एटलीस्ट वो सोसाइटी में जाने कि अच्छा बाकी लोग कैसे होते हैं. लेकिन अगर आप बात करेंगे हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट की, विजुअल इम्पेयरमेंट की, और अगर मैं कहूं ये ऑर्थोपेडिकली हैंडीकैप्ड की, तो यस इनको हम हायर एजुकेशन तक लेके जा सकते हैं. देयर आर लॉट्स ऑफ एग्जांपल कि दे हैव टेकन, दे आर प्रोफेसर्स इन इंग्लिश इन कुरुक्षेत्र यूनिवर्सिटी. he is visually impaired, right? तो कहीं ना कहीं इनका जो बाकी सेंसेस हैं, दे आर वर्किंग, दे आर सिस्टम्स विद जो ये ब्रेन लर्न कर लेते हैं, बाकी एड से ये पढ़ लेते हैं, तो इनके लिए पॉसिबल है. बट हम कभी नहीं कहते, लिटरेचर या रिसर्च भी नहीं कहती कि आपको चाहे सिवियरली या रिटार्डेड हैं या सिवियरली हैंडीकैप्ड हैं, उनको भी आप इंक्लूड कीजिए ना. हम सभी की इंक्लूजन की बात यहाँ नहीं करते. अगेन इट डिपेंड्स ऑन, अगर चिल्ड्रन विद डिसेबिलिटी की बात करें तो उन्हीं को इंक्लूड करना है जो एडुकेबल हैं और ट्रेनेबल हैं. देयर आर केसेस जहां पर हर 1 घंटे में जो सेरेब्रल पाल्सी बच्ची है उसको यूरिन के लिए जाना पड़ता है, उनके पेरेंट्स असिस्ट करते हैं, लेकिन स्टिल दे वांट कि अच्छा वो नॉर्मल स्कूल में एक बार देखे तो बाकी सब बच्चों को. तो हायर एजुकेशन का जहां तक बात है, तो अगर IQ की बात अगर आ जाती है या उनके लर्निंग की बात आ जाती है, तो फिर हम उनको बहुत हायर एजुकेशन तक नहीं दे सकते हैं. वो तो 10th 7th इज द अपर लिमिट, 6th इज द अपर लिमिट. उसके बाद जैसे ही मैथ्स में LCM, HCF, लॉजिक और ये आना शुरू होगा, वो बच्चा केपेबल नहीं है. इंटेलेक्चुअल एंड डेवलपमेंटली जो डिसेबल्ड है वो नहीं कर पाएगा.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. The next question is from Kaushik, somewhat already answered by you, but I think that you would like to take this again. My question is that, what is your observation on autistic children and on their education, which is a very burning issue today?
सर अगेन मैंने अपने आई थिंक पोएम में भी जिक्र किया कि there are people, there are children I know personally them, right, जो ASD सबसे ज्यादा कॉम्प्लेक्स, जितनी भी डिसेबिलिटीज मैंने पढ़ी, द मोस्ट कॉम्प्लेक्स जो मुझे लगी वो ASD है, क्योंकि बच्चे के पास थ्योरी ऑफ माइंड ही नहीं होती. दे डोंट हैव दैट थ्योरी ऑफ माइंड जो हम सब में डेवलप हो चुकी होती है. दे डोंट नो, जैसे मेरा बेटा 4 इयर्स का है, वो जानता है कि मम्मा की फीलिंग्स क्या है, मम्मा को क्या पेन है, मम्मा अभी खुश है. वेयर एज द ASD में, विद इन ASD अगेन देयर इज डाइवर्सिटी. किसी का स्किल डेवलपमेंट 8 इयर्स में हो रहा है, किसी का लैंग्वेज 5 इयर्स में भी नहीं हो पा रहा है. तो इतनी वेरिएशंस में आप कभी ये नहीं कह सकते कि अच्छा वो पढ़ ही लेगा क्या, उसको पढ़ाना ही है, ये जरूरी नहीं है. इवन अमिताभ बच्चन के साथ उनका इंटरव्यू हो चुका है. कविता करके एक पेरेंट है जिनकी बेटी बहुत अच्छा गाती है, राइट. म्यूजिक में वो कर सकते हैं, वो डांस में कर सकते हैं. जिस एरिया में जो स्किल उनकी अच्छी डेवलप्ड है, हम उसमें उनको करवा सकते हैं. ऐसा कहीं नहीं है कि ये पढ़ाना ही है, आपको ABCD ही सिखाना है, राइट. ये कंपल्शन नहीं है. इतना ब्रॉड माइंड हमें रखना होगा.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. Adani Loko has a very interesting question. He says, do the social attitude towards the physically different people be the bigger reason for failing to implement inclusive education?
Yes, it is one of the reason. Social attitude, how you look at them. आपको लगता है कि ओ यार अब तुम आ गए, अब डिस्टर्ब करोगे हमारे गेम में, है ना, तुमसे नहीं होगा ये. दिस इज अ सोशल एटीट्यूड. आपने देखा होगा पा में जब विद्या बाला अपनी बेटे को लेकर गई हैं पार्क में, तो बोला ओ तुम इसको कहाँ लाई हो. तो सोशल टैबूज, एटीट्यूड्स, दे इम्पैक्ट अ लॉट. मेरा जो खुद के किड्स के लिए जो एक कॉन्फिडेंस है, वो सोसाइटी ज्यादा रिड्यूस कर देती है, नेबर्स ज्यादा रिड्यूस कर देते हैं, राइट. अगर मैं ओवर कॉन्फिडेंट नहीं हूं, मैं प्रॉपरली नॉलेजेबल नहीं हूं, मेरा एक्सपीरियंस नहीं है, तो वो यही कहेंगे अरे पढ़ाया नहीं क्या, पढ़ना बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट था, ये तो ग्रेजुएशन नहीं है, ये तो 10th नहीं है. नो, इट्स नॉट दैट. हमारा एम तो सीवियरली, और जो प्रोफाउंड केसेस है उनके लिए है, क्या वो इंडिपेंडेंट लाइफ को जी लें, क्या वो अपना टॉयलेट ट्रेनिंग कर ले प्रॉपरली, वो पानी ले ले अपने हाथ से, उनकी ये जो मोटर स्किल्स हैं वेदर फाइन और ग्रॉस, वो डेवलप हो जाए. दैट वी वांट फ्रॉम दोस सीवियरली एंड प्रोफाउंड केसेस. सेरेब्रल पाल्सी के केसेस आपने देखे होंगे, वो तो उनका स्पाइनल कॉर्ड ही ठीक नहीं होता, वो अपने नेक ही होल्ड नहीं कर सकते. So they are fully depend on their parents or caretakers for that matter also. तो हम कहाँ कह रहे हैं पढ़ने की बात, राइट. उन केसेस के लिए नहीं बोला, ये उन केसेस के लिए है जो कि कर सकते हैं, जो एडुकेबल हैं, ट्रेनेबल हैं. तो सोशल एटीट्यूड या एटीट्यूड एज सच इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. फिर चाहे वो पेरेंट्स का हो, टीचर्स का हो, नेबर्स या कम्युनिटी का हो, राइट. बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली तो कम्युनिटी में आना है. लोग तो इन सर्वेज में छुपाते हैं, और ऐसा भी देखा गया है कि छुपाते नहीं है, एक्सेस करके भी बताते हैं. अगर 40% नहीं है तो बताते हैं कि यस आई हैव टू मेक सर्टिफिकेट बनाना है, क्योंकि पॉलिसी में लिखा है कि एजुकेशन में देयर इज 4%, जॉब में देयर इज 5%. सो अगर थोड़ा भी इम्पेयरमेंट है तो आजकल तो एक्सेस करके भी बता रहे हैं. अगेन रिसर्च ऐसा भी कहती है. बट यस, यू आर राइट, सोशल एटीट्यूड इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. Shomi Mondol has a question regarding the inclusion of theories, of inclusive theories in school textbooks and larger pedagogues. I think she means inclusion of inclusive theories in normal school textbooks and larger pedagogues.
Sir, मैं समझी नहीं, मतलब what she wants.
I think what she means is, do you think that there should be inclusion of inclusive theories or theories about inclusion in school textbooks and larger theories of pedagogues?
मैं बताना चाहूंगी कि अगर स्कूल टेक्स्ट बुक्स में थ्योरीज ना भी दें तो चलेगा, लेकिन उन थ्योरीज का जो जिस्ट निकल के आता है उनको कहीं ना कहीं इम्प्लीमेंट करें. आप कुछ ऐसी एक्टिविटीज रखें, आपका करिकुलम कुछ ऐसा हो जो हम कहते हैं UDL, यूनिवर्सल डिजाइन लर्निंग, राइट, वो सभी के लिए हो, राइट. उसमें विजुअल को भी अपना कुछ मिल जाए, हियरिंग को भी अपना कुछ मिल जाए, ऑर्थोपेडिकली हैंडीकैप को भी अपना कुछ मैटर मिल जाए. हमारे डिजाइन्स कुछ ऐसे हो हर एरिया में, आर्किटेक्चर में भी, बिल्डिंग के डिजाइन में भी, करिकुलम में भी, पेडागॉगी में भी. फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर मैं मेरे इस लेक्चर को अभी साइन लैंग्वेज में यूज करती प्रेजेंटेशन भी यूज करती और मेरा बोलना भी होता और कैप्शंस भी बच्चा देख पाता, तो आई थिंक मोर इंक्लूसिव ये हो जाता, राइट? तो इसको हम कहते हैं यूडीएल। तो बजाय थ्योरी उनको पढ़ाने के, थ्योरी तो हम टीचर्स बहुत पढ़ रहे हैं, राइट? तो स्कूल लेवल पे हम डायग्राम्स, पिक्चर्स, टेक्टाइल मैटर, इन सबको हम इतना कर दें कि वो इंक्लूसिव थ्योरी रिफ्लेक्ट हो जाए वहां पर, राइट? दैट इज द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन पार्ट। आई थिंक सोमी मैम आप इन्फ्लुएंस्ड हैं इस बात से?
मैडम, शर्मिला मैडम, मैं थोड़ा सा इसमें ऐड करना चाहूँगा कुछ चीज़ों को।
हाँ सर, बताइए।
हाँ, मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि जब हम इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन के बारे में बात करते हैं, ठीक है, ये जो टर्म है हम स्कूल टेक्स्ट बुक में हमने इसको डाला नहीं है, लेकिन आप सोशल स्टडीज़ के आप बुक्स को देखिए तो उसमें हम डायरेक्टली इनडायरेक्टली जो है बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं जहाँ पे जो है इंक्लूसिवनेस का जो सेंस है, सेंटिमेंट है, उसको हम प्रमोट करते हैं। जैसे हम बात करते हैं तो हमारे जो स्कूल टेक्स्ट बुक है उसमें जितने भी कंसेप्ट हैं वो सब के सब कंसेप्ट जो है इंक्लूजन का जो कह सकते हैं कि जो सेंटिमेंट है उसको प्रमोट करते हैं। जैसे वहाँ पे हिस्ट्री के टेक्स्ट बुक को देखिए तो कोई भी ऐसा कंट्रोवर्शियल इश्यूज नहीं है जिसको हाईलाइट करने की बात होती है, जिससे सोसाइटी में किसी भी तरीके का डिस्क्रिमिनेशन का सेंटीमेंट जो है डेवलप हो। तो इन सारी चीज़ों को जो है डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी एटीट्यूड जो है उनको कहीं ना कहीं जो है डीमोटिवेट जो है किया गया है स्कूल लेवल के टेक्स्ट बुक में। और सोसाइटी में कैसे सोशल टॉलरेंस हो, रिलीजियस हार्मोनी हो, कैसे जो है हमारा जो है सोसाइटी का इंटीग्रेशन हो, इन सारी चीज़ों को जो है फोकस किया गया है। तो मुझे लग रहा है कि सोशल साइंस के टेक्स्ट बुक में ये सारी चीज़ें हैं। ठीक है, हम लोग जो है ये टर्म यूज नहीं करते हैं, लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं ये सारी चीज़ें हैं। और जहाँ तक जो है जो हम बात कर रहे हैं बैरियर की, तो ये जो बैरियर है, ये एटीट्यूडनल बैरियर्स मैडम ने बताया, सोशल बैरियर, फिजिकल बैरियर, बहुत सारे बैरियर हैं। लेकिन सुदेव सर ने एक क्वेश्चन किया था जिसमें मैं कुछ ऐड करना चाह रहा था कि जो हमारा सिस्टम है, कहीं ना कहीं जो है हमारा सिस्टम भी बैरियर को क्रिएट करता है। जैसे उन्होंने हायर एजुकेशन के बारे में बात किया था, तो हमारे यहाँ देखिए, हम जो हायर एजुकेशन पे जो बातें करते हैं, हमारे बात जो है हमारे लिए या बाकियों के लिए जो है विचार का काम करते हैं, लेकिन वो विचार जो है तब तक जो है सार्थक नहीं होंगे जब तक उस पर कोई पॉलिसी ना बने। तो हमारे जो पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं, बहरहाल निश्चित रूप से हम हमारे में से भी बहुत सारे लोग जो है पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं, एजुकेशनल एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स हैं, तो वो कर सकते हैं। लेकिन जो पार्लियामेंट में बैठे लोग हैं, जो लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली में जो बैठे लोग हैं, उनकी जो बात है वो एक तरीके से पॉलिसी की तरह होती है। उनके जो विचार हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं जो है पॉलिसी में चेंज होते हैं। तो मुझे लग रहा है कि जब हम सिस्टम के लेवल पे इंक्लूजन की बात करते हैं तो हम डिफरेंट तरीके के जो स्कूल हैं उनको जो हम जिस तरीके से हम प्रमोट कर रहे हैं, जैसे मान लीजिए कि एससी के लिए एक अलग स्कूल बना दिया, एसटी के लिए अलग से स्कूल बना दिया, फिर जो है मुस्लिम के लिए हम मदरसा एजुकेशन सिस्टम को प्रमोट किए जा रहे हैं। कहीं ना कहीं जो है हम लोग को इन सारी चीज़ों को जो है सोचना होगा इस पे कि कैसे जो है विद इन द एजुकेशन जो है जो बैरियर्स हैं, ये जो सोशल बैरियर्स हैं जो कास्ट पे, रिलीजन पे बेस्ड हैं, इनको खत्म करना होगा। जैसे हम सबको पता है कि 1964-66 में हमारे यहाँ कोठारी कमीशन आया था और कोठारी कमीशन ने स्ट्रांगली रिकमेंड किया था कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम को, और इसको इंडोर्स भी किया गया था फर्स्ट नेशनल पॉलिसी ऑन एजुकेशन 1968 में जो बनी थी वहाँ भी। फिर जो है एनईपी नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 1986 ने भी जो है इसको जो है इंडोर्स किया, प्रोग्राम ऑफ एक्शन ने। फिर यहाँ तक कि राममूर्ति रिव्यू कमेटी जब बनी उसमें भी जो है इस बात को जो है बोला गया था कि हाँ कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम होना चाहिए। लेकिन कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम को जो है जिस तरीके से डिफाइन किया गया वो बहुत ही गलत था। कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम जो है ये कॉमन टाइप ऑफ एजुकेशन के बारे में बात किया गया है। स्कूल के में क्या चेंजेज हो, स्कूल कैसे जो है उसमें हर कम्युनिटी का पार्टिसिपेशन हो, इसके बारे में शायद सोचा नहीं किया। और हम देखें तो अलग अलग स्कूलों में जो है माने अलग अलग कह सकते हैं कि अलग अलग लोगों के लिए अलग अलग स्कूल बने हुए हैं। सैनिक स्कूल देखिए, सैनिक स्कूल सैनिकों के लिए हमने स्कूल बना रखा है। फिर जो है जो गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉई हैं उनके लिए जो है केंद्रीय विद्यालय बने हुए हैं, ठीक है। लेकिन रिमोट एरियाज के जो स्कूल देखिए, एक केंद्रीय विद्यालय की स्थिति देख लीजिए और जो रिमोट एरियाज में जो स्कूल है उनकी स्थिति देख लीजिए। तो बैरियर कहीं ना कहीं जो है पॉलिसी के लेवल पे हमारे यहाँ है। तो जब तक ये सारी चीजें जो है ये चेंज नहीं होती है और सिस्टम जो है इसके लिए काम ना करे पॉलिसी के लेवल पे, तब तक जो है ये बैरियर जो है खत्म करना बड़ी मुश्किल है। तो मुझे लग रहा है कि जब हम सोशल जस्टिस के बारे में बात करते हैं, इक्वलिटी या इक्विटी के बारे में बात करते हैं, तो हमको ये सोचना होगा कि विद इन द एजुकेशन सिस्टम जो है सोशल जस्टिस तभी होगा जब हम इंक्लूजन को प्रमोट करें, और तभी जो है जो हमारा जो प्राइम पर्पस है इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन का, इंक्लूसिव सोसाइटी बनाना, तभी होगा। अदरवाइज जो है सेग्रीगेटेड मोड में, आइसोलेटेड मोड में एजुकेशन सिस्टम चलता रहेगा, डिफरेंट स्कूल बनते रहेंगे, तब तक ये सारी चीजें जो है बहुत मुश्किल होगी। हाँ,
Thank you, sir.
Hello, can I say one thing about this policies and all?
Yes,
Hello.
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, maybe you people are not aware, but there is this inclusive education ke liye, there were committees, and then there are laws also that has come out, and especially, of course, the buildings and the kind of slope it should have, and all these things have come up. Also in education things, they have done policies, because we had education of this inclusive education. We had started it in Coimbatore at DJ Academy of Design, very first in India, and then it is still going on at other colleges also. We have introduced, and I mean, my husband was part of that policy making team, so I know about it. And this is these things are already kind of a lot of things are taken in, and actually they had got even the first there is a whole big society of universal design, so they had done the whole education system for universal design, which has got the first grand award in 2016 for his university. I mean, he was the one who was teaching it and all that. So, and it's also got several Ron Mack Award and all that for, and also the our Indian awards and all that for inclusive education. So in case if you need some more information, I can share something with you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shudabda, can I? This is Partho.
Would somebody else like to?
Yeah, Partho. This is Partho.
Yeah, please go ahead, Partho.
Yeah, I must congratulate Dr. Yadav first for attempting such an important and human topic, which otherwise gets almost neglected these days. See, I'm a grassroots worker almost. I teach at Patho Bhavan. So I don't understand big policies. Almost every year in Patho Bhavan, we get some students who are seriously, who have actually serious learning disabilities. And sometimes we get some physically challenged students. Now, I have my experiences of working with them. It's very difficult, I tell you. It's really, really difficult in spite of efforts of reaching out to them with so much of love, empathy, and our, our knowledge and our understanding. It's really, really difficult. It's one thing is to talk about policies and blaming one another. It's one thing. And one thing is to get the first-hand experience of working with them. I think if we want to reach out to them, if you want to accommodate them, if you want to what Dr. Yadav wants to talk about inclusion, is to reach out to them. work with them rather than talking about big policies and so many things. It's not going to change in that way. And Dr. Yadav, it's wonderful. It's the way you have dealt with some of the issues here. What I would request you to please come to Pathu. You know the structure of Pathu. I request you to come to Pathu and maybe help us creating a curriculum, or maybe help us with certain strategies to, to include them more into our. And you are quite right. Who knows who is failing them? Whether the system is failing them, or they are failing the system. I think we need to be more accommodative. So it's my request that if you get some time, please come to Pathu, and maybe we can work together through a learning process to help them out, to bring them into real learning, pool. Thank you for such a speech.
Of course, sir, I will come. I will come and see the things.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. So there's a last question again from Shashwata Bhattacharya. He's talking about the creation of awareness to reduce discrimination, and the laws are made, but only they can implement the things practically, especially in the remote areas. So how are laws which are, how to implement these laws that, render discrimination criminal, especially in remote areas?
So Achudaya, dear, we are working, we are doing research, and we want some research students, those who can work for inclusive education. I personally want to go to, with my research scholars also, to these rural areas. And shuru mein aapne Kaushik sir se sunai hoga. This is, I think, my goal in life, right? Ki at least I have research papers jahan mujhe laga there are many disabilities which are preventable. The cause may be because of the lack of awareness, and we want to spread that awareness among the women, right? Because women jo hai, she can play the role apne child ka nurturing ke liye, prenatal period mein precautions ke liye. There are many things jo hum awareness se kar sakte hain, and I want to do that, right? अभी तो लिटरेचर ही हमने बहुत स्टडी किया. प्रैक्टिकली ये मेरा सपना है कि मैं बंगाल के जो रूरल एरियाज हैं वहां जाऊं. कहीं कहीं यहाँ लैंग्वेज एक बैरियर बन जाता है, तो आई नीड अ रिसर्च स्कॉलर जो इस एरिया में इंटरेस्ट ले और वो मेरे साथ काम करें.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. That was from Shashwata Bhattacharya. So if there are no more questions, shall we wrap up this very interesting and thought-provoking session of the Dialogic Visva-Bharati Young Scholars Lecture Series? Are there any more questions? Would Bipashadi like to come in with the last question, maybe?
Yes, thank you, Shudev. Thank you, Sharmila. I am overwhelmed. It was a very emotive issue that you really addressed, as Shudev said at the very beginning. I'm very, very touched. This is something as teacher, I also believe that all the students who come to be taught by us, they should be made aware of this, because once they go out into academia, they will be facing this kind of situations, and it is very important to be sensitized to these needs of our special children. And I have always believed that one should be taught to be very sensitive. Sarcasm is a weapon or a tool that is often used by teachers, which can really do a lot of harm to students. You just mentioned certain terminologies that are in use. I also say that apart apart from certain terms, there are different ways in which term is practiced. A child, I mean, that child might be 5 years old, that child might be 15 or 18 or 20. You see, because when said in front of people, among peers, it does create a lot of, it does leave a mark. So these kind of handling of different situations of children with different needs and abilities, this is something which we need to address. How much, I also agree with Partho that I don't know about policies, but I feel that even as parents, as members of society, we should, when we really flaunt our education, we should also be aware of these kind of situations. I would just like to share a small experience that I've had recently. I mean, this is not some, this was pointed out to me. Now, there was a social gathering, a social match, which I had attended, a wedding, and the bride was from Calcutta and the bridegroom was from one of the northeastern states, Bengali. But what one of my relatives pointed out, I would like to share with you. My relative said that just make a note that everybody from the boys' side who was introducing one another, you know, it was so curious. I've never seen this before, and I wouldn't have noticed it unless it was pointed out, that they were introducing themselves, their friends, many of them, that by just saying that this is so-and-so, his or her child passed out from IIT or from Shibpur Engineering College, or somebody is doing something in America, the children were all absent. It was enough to just say that whether it is the master.
Bipashadi?
Was underscored was the academic elements of the children. Now, this was as minuscule, but they come from a locality, and I was just thinking that this can create so much of, I mean, lack of confidence in many parents. All the children of all parents are not such academically high flyers. But if this is the kind of attitude from people, and those who are introducing were parents, were doctors and teachers, university professors. So it was really very sad. I mean, when it was pointed out, in line with what you've just said, that we require to change our attitude. It is a social habit, our line of social thinking that needs to be overhauled. Policies can come later. You see, policies will not be, they cannot really successful unless we change our attitude. We can only camouflage much of it with policies. Okay, so I would just like to say that I am very, very happy with your talk. I'm so overwhelmed. We'll have you once again on this forum. Shudev.
Thank you, Professor Raha. Thank you, Dr. Yadav. Now we come to the formal words of thanks. Our first person to thank is, of course, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, whose idea this was way back in 2020. And if I'm not mistaken, Vipashadi, this is our 10th program that we have done. There's one more that we will try to squeeze in before the year ends. So our thanks, heartiest and heartful thanks goes out to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Bidut Chakraborty. We would like to thank our speaker this afternoon, Dr. Sharmila Yadav from the Department of Education, Binoy Bhavan. We would like to thank our library and our library staff for web hosting and online parameters and facilities as always. We would like to thank Dr. Kaushik Ghosh, our in-house tech wizard, who's always been there to host our programs. And this time around, we must thank him once again also for introducing our speaker. We must thank once again our artist in residence for Dialogic, Dr. Arpan Mukherjee, who's been working so tirelessly to provide so many programs, so many posters for us. And we would actually come to think of Arpan actually having a kind of a paper this actually have a kind of a seminar to to put forward all his posters that he has done for Dialogic. We would like to thank finally Professor Bipasha Raha, the last but not the least, and all our members of Dialogic for being with us and working with us. And as I have said earlier, our next speaker tentatively is Dr. Neelmani Jaiswal from the Department of Social Work, PSV, who will be speaking on COVID-19 and its impact on economy sometime in the third week of December, which we will clarify and confirm through the usual channels of communication. So thank you for being with us, and hopefully we will again see you again in the future. So, so good evening and good night.
Good evening.